would now like you to give a very warm welcome to the Minister for Justice and Equality, Mr. Alan Shatter T.D.
Could I start off by thanking our Lord Mayor Nisha for allowing us to use his facilities and for his welcome to the Mansion House, and I'd like to thank Kieran for his kind introduction. This has been a very difficult weekend. It's been particularly difficult for Gardaí in Dundalk, who intimately knew and worked with the late Adrian Donoghue. It's been a very difficult, appalling weekend for his immediate and extended family. And it's something I'm very conscious of. It's something that has occupied, quite rightly, all of our time since the horrendous event occurred around 9:30 or so on Friday evening. So as Minister for Justice, if I could, before we deal with the very important report published today, could I suggest that we now stand and have a minute's silence and remember Adrian and think of his family. Please be seated. I would like to very much thank the Lord Mayor for announcing, as he did, that he's opening a book of condolences in the Mansion House. I know from feedback already received from members of Garda Síochána that's greatly appreciated. I know the people of Dublin will want to share their condolences and have an opportunity to express them with the family. And I expect a great many people are going to call to the Mansion House. I know there's a very substantial support for the Gardaí throughout the community. Everyone is greatly shocked at what's happened. The capacity of individuals to take someone else's life without any thought, purely for their own financial gain, is something that is shocking. And what occurred on Friday evening was brutal, was callous, and was unforgivable. And the Gardaí, of course, have, I know, the support of everyone in this room in bringing to justice those responsible for the tragedy that took place. If I could return to the report published today and say something perhaps that's appropriate in the context of where we are. This particular building, the Mansion House, resonates with the human desire for freedom and equality. The first Dáil and the first cabinet meeting of the government selected by it met here. Something we often forget, the historical place of the Mansion House in the fight for Irish independence. The portrait of Daniel O'Connell reminds us that he was Lord Mayor of Dublin in 1841 and the first Catholic to hold the office since 1690. He was also the inspiring leader of the struggle for Catholic emancipation. I think this is a particularly appropriate location in which to launch this report, and I was both honoured and delighted to accept the invitation to join you this morning. This progress report shows that GLEN's record is indeed an inspiring treasury of solid civil rights achievement. It's a privilege to launch the report this year, which is the 20th anniversary of the decriminalisation of consensual gay sexual activity, and indeed the 25th anniversary of the founding of GLEN. I think GLEN came of age some years ago, but it's truly come of age now. GLEN's achievements confirm that the silenced of history are silent no longer. Indeed, their brave, passionate, reasoned voices speak with the noble password of democracy, equal dignity for all. Edmund Burke wrote over 200 years ago that, and I quote, "No passion so effectually robs the mind of all its powers of acting and reasoning as fear. Fear of the unknown is possibly the most pervasive. The work of GLEN and other advocacy groups over the past decade has dispelled much of the prejudice and contributed substantially to a better public understanding of important issues relating to sexual orientation. This has facilitated a reasoned debate at all levels of Irish society, not least at political level, from town council to national parliament, and driven much of the recent progress in enhancing respect for the rights of all persons, irrespective of sexual orientation, and for very substantial legal reform. Of course, we now occupy a different world to the world of the past in this state. It's also, I think, particularly poignant that last night, in this very building, there was the ceremony held to commemorate the victims of the Holocaust. And we shouldn't forget that gay men and gay women were targeted by the Nazis for elimination, and a great many died in the concentration camps. A great many were killed for no reason other than their sexual orientation. And as we celebrate the progress made in this state, we need to be conscious that in other parts of the world, matters are regressing, not progressing. What's taking place, for example, in Russia with regard to the persecution of those in the gay community is completely unacceptable, a total violation of human rights. The threats of elimination of members of the gay community in Uganda are something not to be tolerated. Legislation that's been suggested there would turn us all the way back into the Dark Ages. It's almost unbelievable that in the 21st century, the approaches that we're seeing in each of those countries could in fact be taking place. So never let's assume that humanity has necessarily, in all parts of the globe, advanced to the extent that we would like it to do so, and let's not forget, as we make progress in Ireland, that there's other parts of the world about which concern should be expressed. The advances in this state of the period covered by today's Progress Report from 2010 to 2012 are remarkable by any standard. In education, where new models of school patronage are responding to the increasingly visible diversity of the Irish population, GLEN and other Irish NGOs are leading the way with the Department of Education and Skills and the education partners on initiatives to combat homophobic bullying. This is work that is drawing attention across the European Union and on the world stage, not least for its inclusiveness and for the degree to which the varied interests of stakeholders have been brought together, forging a strong consensus for action for the welfare of our children and young people. The principle of partnership and of drawing diverse stakeholders together for shared purposes, which GLEN has deployed in activities in the education field, is characteristic of its engagements across all fields. This period has seen practical advances in employment equality, involving major employers, business representative bodies and trade unions in the launch and application of diversity tools and good practice and extension of GLEN's Diversity Champions programme. In healthcare, GLEN has continued to work with the HSE, professional bodies and with healthcare providers towards the mainstreaming of LGBT issues in healthcare, building on the recommendations of the landmark Supporting LGBT Lives study of 2009. The pilot training programme on palliative care and oncology is but one such project. Incrementally, these initiatives are contributing to a profound change in life experiences of LGBT people in Ireland and their families, friends, colleagues and neighbours. Possibly the most visible progress has been in the recognition of relationships and protections for families, where developments are still ongoing. 2010 saw the enactment, with all-party support in the Oireachtas, of civil partnership legislation, its commencement and the first civil partnership ceremonies. One of the most encouraging signs of increasing openness and tolerance in Irish society has been the coverage given in both local and national media, the length and breadth of the country, to joyous celebration of civil partnerships by family, friends and neighbours. This situation is by no means static. On just the 6th of January this year, just a couple of weeks ago, I announced details of further additions to the foreign partnerships recognised as equivalent to civil partnership in Ireland. Recent amendments to domestic violence legislation mean that the protection of the Domestic Violence Act is now available on the same basis to unmarried opposite-sex couples and same-sex couples who have not registered a civil partnership. In addition, couples will no longer be required to have lived together for a minimum period before one of them can obtain a safety order. I always regard it as a particularly odd provision in our legislation, which originally only applied to heterosexual couples, that in order to get a safety order you had to live together. It seemed to me if someone threatened your safety, whether you lived together or not, the law should provide you with the protection of a safety order. One of the gaps in the civil partnership legislation, of course, is the failure to specifically address issues relating to parental rights of gay couples and the legal relationship of gay parents to children being parented by them, in circumstances in which the parents are parties to a civil partnership or individuals cohabiting in an intimate and committed relationship. We have made a commitment in the programme for government to reform and modernise our family law. The rights of the child and ensuring in this area the best interests of the child are the paramount consideration now has a firm constitutional basis in the new provisions contained in Article 42A of the Constitution. Indeed, I find it remarkable the extent to which the enormous change effected by the successful outcome of that constitutional referendum is not yet fully appreciated. With a view to comprehensively addressing this area of the law, I am presently personally engaged in the preparation of a Family Relationships and Children's Bill, which I expect will be published in 2013 and which I hope will receive all party support in the House of the Oireachtas, and also the support of independent members of both houses. Same-sex couples have been good and effective foster parents, and there is a need to reform and bring clarity to issues relating to parentage, guardianship and custody of children of gay couples, and in doing so to frame a law which ensures, as the Constitution requires, that the best interests of children are the paramount consideration. Keeping to the theme of legislative reform for a moment, I'd like to briefly mention Section 37 of the Employment Equality Act. While intended to provide in a balanced way for schools and other institutions to maintain their religious ethos, I'm concerned that in practice the balance is not a fair one, and that the provision can operate in a way that is unfair to LGBT persons. While I have some ideas on how reform might be approached, I'm open to opinions on how to refine these ideas. I consider that an extensive consultative process and formal assessment of the options should be undertaken, and it is my intention to ask the new Irish Human Rights and Equality Commissioners to examine the issue as a priority and to report on their views and recommendations. I am committed to bringing forward to Government proposals for any necessary anti-discrimination amendment to this provision once this consultation process is completed. Civil partnership is essentially marriage in everything but name. The law applicable to effecting a civil partnership and the ceremony celebrated reflects the law applicable in the ceremonial, essentially, of a registry office marriage. I understand, however, the desire that it be recognised as marriage. The present constitutional position is that if you wish to marry another person, he or she must be of a different sex to you. This is the clear consequence of a series of judgments delivered by both our High and Supreme Court. Indeed, one recent judgment of the Supreme Court makes that absolutely clear. A condition of human dignity and self-respect, I believe, is the personal autonomy to pursue on an equal footing with others one's own conception of a full and rewarding life. I personally believe that a democratic republic that professes a commitment to the principle of equal citizenship should not continue to prevent same-sex couples from entering into a legal partnership that is legally recognised and designated as being a marriage. I am, of course, conscious that not everyone shares my view on this important issue. As you know, the programme for government contains a commitment to refer the issue of same-sex marriage to the Constitutional Convention, which commenced its detailed substantive deliberations this weekend. I look forward, as the government does, to receiving the views of the Convention and I have no doubt that GLEN will set out its views clearly and articulately and forcibly to members of the Convention. Should the Convention recommend the holding of a referendum on this issue, it is a matter that will be treated with the utmost seriousness by government. Should there at a future date be a referendum on same-sex marriage, it's important to understand that the most important resource we have to diffuse the fears of those who oppose same-sex marriage is calm, lucid reason. I know that this is a resource that GLEN has in abundance. It is a sad fact that homophobia and prejudice against transgender people remain a reality in Europe, sometimes expressed overtly in violence or in legislation, sometimes merely covert. Let us be in no doubt that this represents an ongoing threat to the well-being of communities and of all citizens, whatever their gender, be they gay, lesbian, heterosexual, which must actively be challenged. In Ireland, we continue to make our own progress on this front. There is broad public support for gay pride events, which have never attracted the same level of opposition here as in some other states. This does not mask the fact that in our schools, our sporting events, our working and our social environments, our minorities still feel they can, with impunity, launch into homophobic abuse of other individuals. Respect for the fundamental rights of all under the rule of law is the bedrock of our Constitution and of the shared values on which the European Union is founded. That this is an essential element of the compact we have all entered into on joining the EU is a point I've emphasised to my colleagues, Justice and Home Affairs Ministers from all EU member states at our informal council meeting in Dublin Castle on the 17th of January. Last Tuesday, I spoke at the International Holocaust Remembrance Day in the European Parliament in Brussels, and remembered, as we did again last night, that the victims also included the Roma, Sinti, Slavs, gay men and women, disabled persons, Jehovah's Witnesses and dissidents. I said it was a moral imperative that we unequivocally repudiate the reprehensible rhetoric of those who seek to contaminate our political discourse and attempt to inflame dangerous prejudices. I believe we must do more in the European Union under the rule of law to end intolerance, racism and anti-Semitism. Ireland has been elected by the international community to the United Nations Human Rights Council. I'm looking forward to developing the profile afforded by this role and by the Irish presence of the EU, working with colleagues here in Ireland across the EU and on the wider international stage to combat homophobia across Europe and promote tolerant societies which allow all citizens as equal citizens an opportunity to thrive and lead their lives in peace. We cannot ask of other states what we are not prepared to do ourselves. We must and are prepared to lead by example. In the context of the Irish presidency of the EU, I have asked EU Justice and Home Affairs Ministers how we can tackle this particular issue. This was a conversation held during the course of a discussion during the EU meeting in Dublin Castle, in which we addressed issues of fundamental rights in Europe and how we can unite to ensure that legislation that does exist in most member states is uniformly applied, and what more we can do on a coordinated basis as in the EU Justice and Home Affairs Ministers' domain to ensure that individuals are genuinely not discriminated against, genuinely not targeted, and free to go about their lives. I believe legislation is not enough, but the uniform application of it is, of course, important. We must change minds and hearts. And it is clear from some of the comment made, indeed, unfortunately, some public comment made by some of those in politics in Europe, that there remains a need to change hearts and minds. The essential challenge, in my view, is to fashion a holistic means by which member states can share best practice, monitor standards, and formulate appropriate recommendations and guidelines for action. My European colleagues supported my suggestion to ask the Commission to initiate a broad public debate with governments, civil society and citizens. The Commission has agreed to do so and to come back during the course of 2014 with the results of this process with a package of recommendations on a mechanism to promote the rule of law, as well as specific suggestions about what needs to be done next to improve protection of fundamental rights across Europe. Walt Whitman, in his poem Song of Myself, calls out, and I quote, "Unscrew the locks from the doors, unscrew the doors themselves from their jambs." He is protesting against social barriers based on prejudice. He wants the winds of human solidarity based on equality to blow freely. He asserts the value of equal dignity for all, saying, "Whatever degrades another degrades me. Whatever is done or said returns at last to me." The commitment to equal citizenship is the password to a better future. It is the very password GLEN has invoked so eloquently in its 25 years of existence. I want to welcome the report published by you today. I want to wish you in GLEN success in re-energising our society's commitment to equal dignity for all its citizens, and I want to guarantee to you my support as Minister for Justice and Equality. I emphasise justice and equality in the work you're doing, and I want to thank you for the assistance that you've given in ensuring that so many important issues have been addressed in a considered, reasoned and responsible way by so many members of Leinster House across party lines, because all too frequently serious issues that may be a source of sensitivity, in respect of which individuals have very fixed views, give rise to unnecessary contention, unfortunate comment, and can, in the context of debates that take place, instead of making things better, may contribute to making things more difficult. And I think the success of GLEN has been its capacity to dialogue with people with differing views, to do it in a reasoned way, and to facilitate cooperation at political level between political parties who frequently don't agree with each other about all too much. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Minister, for that comprehensive, powerful and indeed moving speech. That's the end of the formal procedures here today. The Lord Mayor has had to leave. We kept him much longer than we should have, and I hope that his next appointment will forgive us on that. So again, thanks very much for the Minister coming along, taking time out from his hectic schedule, and thank you as well for coming along here today. Thank you.